Hello, and welcome to the Trauma Uncomplicated podcast, where we untangle the ways complex trauma formed you and your relationships and give you the tools to get your grounded, true self back in the driver's seat. My name is Christie Morgan, and I am a relational trauma therapist. Bethany, I am so excited to have you on our podcast and get to hear a little bit about, boundaries and your work as a boundaries coach. And we go back a ways. I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was that we were dancing together in Houston.
Yeah. I think it's coming up on 10 years.
Yeah.
I think I moved to the Northwest almost 10 years ago. So something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So much has changed. We're both married, both have 2 kids now. And it's just so beautiful to see how our paths have crossed. But I would love to start by, just having you share with our audience what makes you you.
Mm-hmm. This is such a good question. We were chatting beforehand because this is something I help other people process through, right? So then it's one of those moments where it's like, okay, now I get to share with you the work that I've done. So I'll give like some of the standard answers just for like context, and then share a little more, maybe like my own values kind of thing. So, yeah, I live in the Northwest, my husband, my 2 kids, past as a professional dancer. That very much has just like shaped that was a huge part of my life for a long time, and shaped a lot of how I see the world, how I experience the world. And so now as a mom and as a coach and as a friend and a wife and a sister and all of those things, I think then I get to really I've learned to maybe more like fully embrace just some of the things that I value. Like I really value being a kind person, and I want to be that person that people feel really comfortable sharing their life with, sharing like the struggles and the joys, and to know that like I'll be somebody that'll be right there for them. And then also learning to be that person for myself. So when I'm struggling or when I'm experiencing joy, I can be there for me. So I can like not hide from the grief, or not be afraid to embrace joy, and like be like, I'm really enjoying myself right now. 'Cause I think in the past I've felt maybe like almost felt bad, or like, oh, someone out there is struggling and so I can't be happy right now. And so learning to like embrace the whole spectrum of human emotions, I think has been a big part of my story, my journey, still learning how to do that. I think always will be. Yeah, but I hope that other people experience me as someone who's very present with them, and as someone who's learned to be present for herself, and whatever that looks like that day.
Yeah, I love that. And the word that just, or the phrase that keeps coming to mind as you were talking is like resting place. Like I feel like you're a resting place for people where you can step in and just like have this big exhale, and I think so many of us need that in our lives. And I remember when I was first coming into the dance company and total newbie, and I had so much anxiety. And I remember there was a moment we were stretching before ballet class because I was like, oh gosh, I can't do this. And you were just like so present there. And I remember that. And yeah, I think you are that kind person that people feel just so relaxed around and they can rest in. So yeah. So thinking about, your journey, tell us a little bit about what brought you to being a boundaries coach. It's such a specific thing. And yeah, I'd love to hear your journey in that.
Yeah, totally. So this came kind of out of COVID. I feel like COVID was like a reset for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I was graduating, finishing my master's program, that focused in on ministry and leadership, but specifically on women, care for women. And so I was finishing this program, and that's not like a natural, like feeds into being an engineer kind of degree, it's a little more abstract. And so I was just trying to think like, okay, I know I love one-on-one conversations with people. I know I love helping people process their stuff. And so in talking with my husband, who is a therapist as well, then we kind of brought up the idea of coaching. And I started just like general life coaching. I got my training and started with general coaching, but then I noticed kind of a theme pop up as I was working with women, like, oh, this is a common thing that people struggle with, that we maybe feel a lot of guilt around really easily. And something in my own story that I've had to learn. And so it was just kind of this natural, I felt like I came alive when I was helping people with that.
Mhm.
And so that's what led me specifically into boundaries coaching. And then just a little, like tidbit from my own story, that some people might relate to. I grew up as a middle child, but the oldest daughter. And so I think sometimes there's like oldest daughter stuff,
Mhm.
where I just internalized like it was, and no one told me this, but I internalized that it was my job to like take care of everyone, never upset anybody. And I realized in later years as an adult, like that I was burying a lot of even just like preferences, like what I wanted to eat. That
Mhm.
like if we went out to eat, and I would kind of like overthink that, and like what would the rest of the table maybe like a bite of, or like just
Right.
things like that, where I was very keenly aware of everyone else's needs and preferences and hopes and dreams, and a little less in touch with my own.
Mm.
Um, and so I think as I've learned some boundaries, or like healthy boundaries, and just learned about myself more, then it's really exciting to help other people do the same.
Yeah. Even as you're talking, I'm like, oh gosh, like this is so much of you learning how to be fully you is like you see
Mhm.
yourself and you are this like kind person that people can rest in, but how do you be that while still being you in the process? And it sounds like you've been able to kind of find like, okay, there is this balance. I'm not a quote unquote bad or selfish person for having boundaries. I can be this kind, loving presence in people's lives and still have boundaries and know what's me and what's other people. Um, yeah. Well, I am curious. We're talking about boundaries. How would you even define a boundary and what makes it different from a punishment? Because a lot of people feel like, oh, like I got to do this to control somebody else's behavior, but that's not what a boundary is.
Right.
So, what is a boundary?
Yes, yes. So I'm going to read someone else's wonderful definition of a boundary, and then I'll throw in some of my own nuances. So Nidra Glover Tawwab is a great resource on boundaries. She has this book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace, if you want to check it out.
Yes.
Um, but she says boundaries are expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. So expectations and needs we all have, and we all desire to feel safe and comfortable. Of course, there's times we're going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay, like, so there's nuance here, but in general, I think a helpful way to think about it, expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable.
Wow.
We've already touched on a little bit the like me, not me, is
Mm.
a nice boiled down way to think about it as well. Um, I like to think of boundaries as something that answers the question, how do I want to interact with the world around me? And
Mm.
lots of different kinds of boundaries. It might not be specifically in like relationship context. Might be, well, I mean, your relationship with yourself, that's another way, but your time, energy, just different aspects of your life. So it's not always about like conflict with other people.
Mm.
So I think that's then helpful when it comes to distinguishing the difference between a boundary and a punishment. So punishment, I think more so comes from a place when we are like, we're overwhelmed, we're tapped out, and like our system is trying to find a way to get that space that we need to feel safe and comfortable. And sometimes the only way we know how to do that is to, give someone the silent treatment, or like, I'm going
Mm.
to stick it to them and make sure that they're maybe
Mhm.
feeling the same pain that I'm feeling right now, because we're trying to communicate that there's something off, but maybe not doing it in a way that's like congruent with our values.
Mm.
Um, so I think a boundary is more of a like a healthy limit when you know what you need in the moment. It's not about controlling somebody else. But
Mm.
it's, how do I want to respond in this moment? How do I want to interact with this scenario, this is what I can do. This is what I can bring to the table, what I can take responsibility for. And it's not about making the other person suffer or putting them down,
Yeah.
or putting them then in the same position that you are. And now you're both stuck and hurting.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I think that's such a great question to ask of like, how do I want to interact with the world around me? It's very much an empowering thing of like, I can do something to help myself feel safe and comfortable. Or like even just to help myself feel like I can be at my baseline.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times I see a lot of, when I work with couples where they're like, well, I can't feel safe until this person changes their behavior or the way they interact with me. And once we start talking about boundaries and we're like, okay, what is in your control? How can you remove yourself from the situation? How can you limit the ways you interact or change the ways you interact so that you can feel safe and grounded in yourself? Like it changes the whole thing where it's like now you have some element of control. You're not a victim in
Yeah.
life at the, just like at the mercy of other people's behavior. Um, and I love what you point out of like, it's not just about conflict either. Like,
Mhm.
we might need boundaries around how much we expend ourselves at work or, how, even just caring for our physical selves, like how much sleep do we let ourselves have or not have? And, just helping ourselves know, okay, I know what I need to feel my best and I'm going to respect those limitations and
Mhm.
have this boundary with myself.
Mhm.
I'm curious if what you can say about, internal boundaries, like around self-talk and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
anything you'd like to share about that? Because that's another element that I think is often missed in boundaries.
Yeah, totally. I think, yeah, when we know, like, if we're able to kind of to understand some of our like core values, some of the things that we like to lead with in our life,
Mm.
then one that's going to help us know a little more when a boundary is crossed, but it can shift that like internal dialogue from like how dare they, or like how dare I do that, whatever, like your
Yeah.
internal you do something that it's a habit you've been trying to change for a long time and now you're really down on yourself uh
Hmm.
because you messed up.
Hmm.
uh, and so you can have that kind of like, how dare you, you're the worst, how terrible, um
Yeah.
kind of dialogue. And so then when you understand like, oh, it makes sense that I'm really upset about that right now because I have this value, or I say I have this value, and I wasn't living congruent with that. And
Hmm.
so like it makes sense that I'm really upset. And here's what I know I know I need next time.
Hmm.
And so we can extend that compassion to ourselves.
Hmm.
Um, that's the same in relationships with other people too. There's very much a mirror. So I think any like sound wisdom in relationships with other people, I think you can apply to your relationship with yourself. Like it makes sense that I'm upset about that because that's not who I want to be.
Yeah.
And you can acknowledge that, but you don't have to go down the spiral of believing now that's who I am.
Mhm.
But in that moment, that's not who I wanted to be. And next time I have the agency, I have the choice to do different.
Yeah. Wow. So much like compassion in
Mm.
that. Yeah. So when we had talked earlier, we had talked a little bit about how having a boundary can actually help you love other people
Mm.
well. And I'm curious to hear you share a little bit about how is having a boundary not selfish and how does it actually help you love other people in your life better?
Yeah. Yeah. I love this so much. I feel like it's been like the biggest thing for me because for a long time I felt like if I assert my preference or even just put it out there, not even that we have to like go with it, but even just putting it out there is making me selfish. Um, and then I remember thinking one day, I was like, so if I'm so concerned with other people's preferences and it's a-okay for them to share theirs, like I want them to, because I want to do that for them, right? Like
Right.
what I'm not if other people are having that same kind of like care towards me, like I'm not letting them care for me in a way that's like really genuine and meaningful in a way that I can receive if I'm not being honest in what I like and what I would enjoy.
Mhm.
So almost like kind of like taking that blessing from someone else of being able to like bless you really specifically when I think about how much I love to like do that for people and be really specific to them. So I remember it was actually with the dance company one time we were on tour and one of our hosts like wanted to do our laundry for us. We're like, that is so nice, but like you don't have to do that at all. Like dancer laundry is gross. And
Yeah.
she said, like, don't steal that blessing from me. It's like that is like
Uh,
I hadn't thought of it in that way before. Like she would feel blessed to do that for us. So um it's like a little aside, but how boundaries are not selfish and how they actually set us free. Um yeah, in that like similar vein, when we fully like show up and are able to be authentic and just like put it out there, like this is what I would like, or this is what I would enjoy. What would you like? What would you enjoy? And now you've increased like the opportunity for intimacy, for like truly knowing each other and being known. And now you can decide maybe what's best in that scenario. So it doesn't have to be my way or the highway, and it doesn't have to be like anything goes, que sera, sera, which usually ends up in a little bit of a woe is me kind of
yeah.
moment, honest. It's like, well, internally, like, I really would have rather done X, Y, and Z, but they were more vocal, so we're going to go with theirs.
Mhm.
So when you can like just authentically show up as yourself, I think we are we're honoring ourselves, we're honoring other people having an opinion as well. And it's really setting us free to be more genuine. So when I say, yes, I would rather do what you want to do, um, then that's like it's a choice. It's like truly loving. It's not obligation. It's not, it doesn't get wrapped up in like weird things where like, well, I hope you start to keep a tally. Like, I hope they're keeping track of how often we've done their thing, and someday that's gonna come back around and I'll be able to say, we've done your thing the last 5 times and now I get to do
Mhm.
mine. And then it becomes like manipulative and just unhealthy and weird. Um and I used to do that. I used to live kind of in resentment, keeping a tally of like what I've done for people, and just kind of like fingers crossed that someday that'll come back and be for me too, but all the time like pretending like I was super happy about it. So I wasn't being genuine. Like I was really inauthentic. And one of my core values is authenticity. Like I
Mhm.
really
Yeah.
I want that out of other people. That's who I enjoy being around, is authentic people. And I'm not being that. I'm not being congruent with something that that really value. So um and there's just a lot of freedom when I can say, this is what I would enjoy.
Yeah.
Does that sound good to you? And a
Yeah.
lot of times we're like, yeah, actually that sounds great. And like it's just like, thanks for showing up. Let's do that. That sounds fun. Um,
Yeah. I feel like I'm hearing a few things there. I'm hearing like, one, how can we expect to have real relationships with people if the person they're relating with isn't really you? And so, like, by taking that risk of having boundaries and showing up authentically, yes, there's a risk of disappointing somebody, but you're also like giving yourself that chance of having an actual relationship with a real person.
yeah.
And then the other thing is like, yeah, like the more we're able to show up authentically, and I love that this authenticity piece is has turned into kind of the focus of our talk about boundaries, is like the more we're able to show up authentically by having boundaries, the more we're allowing the relationship to grow without resentment kind of, growing its weeds into the relationship. We're not getting into a place where we're keeping tally, or we're saying yes when really we don't want to do something, and then later it comes out. So we're helping just build that like positive connecting space between the two people, rather than, oh gosh, like, okay, in the moment I'm people pleasing and they're going to like what I say, but it's later going to come back to get us because I'm going to have that resentment in
Yeah.
me.
I'm gonna have to back out
I'm gonna have to
and
back out,
yeah.
yeah, and be flaky with them. And then, gosh, that disturbs the trust in the relationship. And so, yeah, I'm just hearing like, okay, having boundaries is helping us not only have a really authentic relationship, but we're not building resentment and we're building trust, which is, foundational for having a healthy relationship. So, yeah. Um, and I think another piece that we had talked about last time we met was that when you are operating from your baseline, when you're in a grounded place and because you're respecting your own boundaries, then you're able to give more freely and you probably have a bigger capacity for pouring out into the people around you. So, yeah. Okay. Well, now for the person who still really struggles with like, I'm a bad person or I'm being selfish if I have a boundary, say this is a client that you meet with in your coaching program, what would you say to them as they're trying to like get themselves to a place where they can test out having boundaries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna come in kind of twofold. So I'm gonna say like start small with really low risk scenarios. So like you're I'll give the example of being out to eat again, like you're out to eat and like order what sounds good to you, not what you think the rest of the table might want to bite from. And that's not even something you have to communicate. That's not
Mm,
something you have to like here is my boundary. I'm getting what I want and you're gonna like deal with it, which by the way, that's not a healthy way to communicate a boundary. But, so that's like a low risk thing, and probably most other people at the table are like expecting that you're going to order what
what
sounds
you
good.
want.
Yeah, so start in like some super low risk scenarios where maybe you won't feel that like guilt piled on. You might still feel it a little bit though, and I think something we can start to learn is the difference between like true guilt, like I did something wrong or like harmful to somebody else, and like false guilt that
Mm,
kind of takes us down in that like I feel like that's a little more like you shouldn't have done this, and it's like really
mm.
like accusational inside.
Like a shame
Um
voice.
and yeah. And I think it's often a little more vague too. So it's not like, oh, I did something, this specific thing that I shouldn't have done or was like harmful to somebody else is different than kind of that general vague, like, you're a terrible person for whatever it is you're feeling guilty about. I think I just also want to encourage you to like those feelings are still going to come up, and so we can start to develop the skills of being able to like start to discern like did I truly do something wrong, or
Mm.
is this false guilt, and maybe that's something I want to think about later or talk with a trusted friend
Mm.
about later. In the moment I think this is the best thing to do, and so I'm going to keep moving forward, and so that you're not getting stuck like in that pit. um,
I love that idea of just like fact checking, like having trusted people in your life that you can later be like, I'm really in my head about this. Like, does this seem selfish to you? Or is is my shame voice just like really strong right now? Being able to like, yeah, I think we need to recalibrate almost, like, especially if we grew up in dysfunctional homes or we have some trauma, it's we've been calibrated to the trauma or to the dysfunctional environment. And we have to recalibrate and be like, okay, what actually is selfish and what is just you being authentic and like trying to get back to um that place of, yeah, being really honest with yourself of, is this really selfish or is this just, a distorted view of what just happened? Yeah.
yeah. And I think when we kind of like we mentioned it earlier, even when you start to take those steps of just like, I'm going to voice my preference in this situation, and we might end up going with the other person's preference.
Yeah.
And so we might like still be making the same choice we would have made if we hadn't voiced ours, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
But it's coming from like a different place in our heart. Like, okay, I have shared myself. We've still chosen this path, but I'm genuinely choosing that path now. And so I can willingly walk down it and even check. I know this is kind of like ethereal metaphor, but you like check in a little bit down the road. Like, is this still working for both of us? Or
Yeah.
does something need to shift a little bit? And so because I think sometimes when we think of like boundaries are selfish, we're thinking of that like super rigid, my way or the highway, like everything in this scenario needs to serve me. And I think there can be a lot more like compromise and like checking in, touching base with people as we're walking through our circumstances. That's going to feel more balanced, more healthy, more like we're in this together,
Mhm.
instead of leading with that like, well, if I'm going to set a boundary, it has to be all about me always. That's not
Mhm.
a healthy boundary. That's a really rigid stance to take.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
and
we still
I
want to
think
show up.
I think I'm also hearing from you that like boundaries can be flexible, like you can alter them. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, so there's the idea of like really rigid boundaries or really like porous boundaries where just kind of you let anything happen, um, happen to you, happen around you. Um, and we want to be more in that kind of like healthy, flexible middle ground. Not that we're looking for like a specific point, but where you are able to kind of just, yeah, like assess how things are going. And if you're already in the practice of bringing up maybe your preferences, your desires, things that you're really valuing that you're not experiencing, or things that you value that you're not experiencing, and being able to say like, hey, like it. Let's try to give a concrete example. So maybe you're having a conflict with your spouse. You disagree about something, and you're trying to figure out a way forward. If there's a time like for me, like I talked about earlier, like I really value kindness. And
Mhm.
so when I notice in myself, like I'm getting overwhelmed and maybe I'm getting really snippy, or more often when I do, I tend to withdraw and withhold.
Mhm.
When I notice that starts happening in me, okay, I'm not showing up authentically. I'm not able to use kind words anymore. Hey babe, I need a break. Can we circle back in 5-10 minutes? Like I'm gonna go sit by myself for a little bit
Yeah.
and come back. And this is in a healthy, like loving relationship. I want to just acknowledge there can be other like really unhealthy dynamics where maybe that's not an option that you have. But I'm gonna remove myself for a second. I'm gonna go breathe,
Mhm.
and just kind of check in with like what am I really, what do I need to bring to the table? What part of this do I need to own? What do I need to express that I hope could look different? And now I get to come back like, okay, I had a second to think. I'm not running away from it and leaving it there, pretending like it never happened, but we're coming back, we're addressing it. And so we're checking in. Hey, I realized I need more of this. Are you can
Mm.
to do that for me? Is there anything more that you need, like anything different you need from me? Um, and and that just like totally like diffuses everything.
Mm.
You feel closer, and you actually know each other better. And then it's like exciting. Like, okay, we get to like keep keep living this life and like building this life together. This is great. Um, and I'm, usually very like tearful and splotchy still at that point. So it's not like everything is like sunshine and roses now.
Right.
And so yeah,
So
yeah.
it's collaborative, it sounds like you're able to collaborate and there is space for others in how you're deciding how to navigate something, but um you still are being true to what you need and you're making space to hear what the other person needs as well. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So all of this is possible if we even just like we still need to know ourselves. We have to know what we truly want, what we truly feel. What would you say to somebody who is at the very beginning of that journey, and how can they start exploring like who they really are and what they need? I feel like it's such an abstract concept of like knowing yourself, you know?
Yes,
So it's like,
yes.
where do you start with that process?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think this sounds like super simple, and I don't mean it to sound like Dr. Google, but you can like Google core values, and it'll give you a list of core values, and like you can just kind of go through like which ones like stand out to me. I'm gonna like write those down, and what are my like top 3 or 5 that I tend to lead with. Like I really value respect, or I really value like trustworthiness or honesty. Um, and I think sometimes when we just like see it written out, we're like, oh, I do really gravitate towards that, or I'm really bothered when that's not present. Might
Yeah.
even kind of the more like maybe visceral reaction we have. Um, and then maybe just spend a little time think like, where does that show up in my life, in like my normal like day to day? Um, do I feel really off if I don't quite tell somebody like the truth of why I'm late for work or something, like do
Yeah.
these kind of scenarios. And so you'll start to maybe, now that they've kind of been highlighted for you, start to notice where you're implementing those values, or where you're frustrated when those values aren't reciprocated. Um, so that can be one place to start. Um,
Mm.
I think another place to start is that like those small moments of just like, okay, I'm driving through and getting coffee. What if you don't have a go-to that you like always get, like what sounds good to me today? Or
Yeah.
maybe you do have a go-to, and you're like, why do I always get that? I want to try something new. So it can be kind of fun and playful. I think we don't have to always stay in the like I don't know, in like the deep conflict zone applications. I think we can also just kind of have fun, or like, what do I want to wear today? And just kind of challenge yourself to like make some choices that are just fun and for you, and maybe kind of make you smile. Nobody else knows why you wore that sweater today, but I know, and I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Uh, some little moments like that, and then you can start to build on that. So you're starting small, and then it starts to carry over into maybe more meaningful, or more like high risk scenarios, if you will.
Mm. Yeah, I feel like I'm hearing you say throughout this, like start small. Like you don't need to like dive into the most risky or, high stakes situation when you're having boundaries or trying to know yourself. Like start small, let it be playful, let it be fun. I know Brene Brown has a really awesome core values resource, exercise that, could Google and try that out. But I'm also hearing like notice what sensations are coming up in your body as you try on this sweater that you don't normally wear, or you try this drink you don't normally drink, or you experiment with like, is this a value of mine? Just like noticing what sensations are coming up in your body. Like, do you feel like you're coming to life, or do you feel angry when something's missing? Um, and this could be a whole other conversation, but anger is such a valuable emotion just because it tells us like what we need or what is missing. And um like, what are we afraid of? Did we feel disrespected? And from there being able to dig into like, okay, what values did that just touch on? So that's a whole other conversation, but yeah, like noticing what's coming up in your body too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, before we go, I want to ask you a few more questions that are a little bit more abstract, but in your experience, what does it mean to you to be fully alive? We've talked a lot about coming home to ourselves and
Mhm.
um, getting in touch with ourselves. What does it mean to be fully alive?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So you were just talking about like those like physical sensations, and kind of being in touch with your body. I was reflecting on this the other day. I was a dance major in my undergrad, And that was some of the first times that I had like modern dance classes. And modern dance classes can go down like super funky roads sometimes. That like that served me so much, because it was very much like we're all gonna yell right now. I was like, what in the world? Like we're all gonna yell right now. Like, no, I'm not angry. Like there's nothing to yell about. Why am I like, and I'm like embarrassed? Is everybody else gonna yell? Am I gonna be the only one yelling? So kind of some experiences like that, but that like helped me get in touch with my body, because I think I grew up with like a pretty healthy relationship with my body, but just not super in tune with um oh, like my heart is beating really fast right now, and that's telling me something.
Mm.
uh, and so as a dancer, just doing a lot more like somatic body centered exercises kind of helped me like tap into that, I think, in a really helpful way. That then now having that kind of skill set, then coupled with my faith in God, coupled with just like walking through normal daily things, if some of those like pieces are kind of off,
Mm.
then I know some I need care of some kind. uh,
Mm.
and
Mm.
that's worth paying attention to. And when I do pay attention to that, then there's this relief in my body, even if the external scenarios have not, like circumstances haven't changed at all, but there's a peace and a rest that I experience. um
Mm.
I can care for myself in really specific to me ways, not just like I think I should do this because
Mhm.
that's what the world around me is telling me that I need, but like I know what I specifically need. And those moments, yeah, I think where I feel that peace, I feel that rest, I feel like almost like I'm not trying to like balance on one leg anymore. Like I have a choice if
Mm.
I step forward with my right foot or my left foot, or do I pick this thing up with my left hand or my right hand? And that feels like so like hearing myself say that, like that's kind of a strange thing to like have the option of which foot do I want to step forward with first. But I think when our bodies aren't like stressed out, um
Mm.
moment, then we have some of that freedom, and that freedom spills over into other areas of our lives. It feels like, yeah, like standing by a stream in the forest and you get that like really clear breath of air. I
Mm.
grew up somewhere that had really polluted air, and living in the Northwest, there's just so often I'm just like, this is like clean, beautiful air, and it fills your lungs, and it's invigorating.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, being fully alive, I think is often a combination of things. It's the physical, it's the spiritual, it's the circumstantial,
Mm.
kind of, and how are they all like interacting together, and can I be like present to that?
Mm.
Have my eyes open both to what I need, to the world around me, what they might need. um, and I have the freedom to interact with it as I need to.
Beautiful. Yeah, just like being in touch with the present moment in every way possible. Uh, And the last thing I wanted to ask you is in moments where the path just feels really long, um, because for many of us, the path is very long. What do you draw from in order to keep going? Where do you find that strength for yourself to be able to, yeah, keep pushing forward, knowing that the healing is coming, even if it feels like it's so far away?
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes it is far away.
Yeah.
I think that has been a helpful thing for me, is like the pursuit of healing is so good and right, and it's worth persevering in. And in this life, we might never reach that point that we're hoping to reach, and that does not sound encouraging. But sometimes that reality of like, oh, okay, if I can like celebrate like each step of healing, so it's not like I need to get from point A to point Z, and until I'm at Z everything else is crap. um but each little step is really beneficial. And when you can look back at like point C, you're at point C and you can look back at A, like I'm not at A anymore. This is really exciting. And I do see a difference, even if it's something very small. I think that can really encourage us. Having people around us that are going to celebrate those little wins with you,
Mm-hmm.
is gonna, like, you're not alone on
Mm-hmm.
the journey. You might feel alone at times or much of the time, but when we are able to share authentically with trusted people around us, I think that really really buoys us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's been a big thing for me, and for me that's my faith community, my church family, even long distance friends from a long time ago that I can text and say, like, this is a rough day. Can you pray for me? Can you tell me I'm not crazy? Can you like, I just, can I just
Mm-hmm.
vent? And, can you just share something that's true about me, true about my scenario, true
Mm-hmm.
about what I believe, um, and help me keep going.
Mm, yeah. It's like that community helps you get back in touch with yourself when you've started to spiral or feel like you're losing touch with who you are and what this path is that you're on. Yeah. Well, beautiful. Thank you so much, Bethany. Yeah, it's just such a pleasure being able to hear from you about your journey and um, the work that you're doing. And if somebody wanted to get in touch with you and continue working on boundaries with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah. You can email me directly, Bethany, Bethany, at nectarfull.com. Nectarfull is the word nectar, Full. Um, that is the coaching collaborative that I'm part of. You can also go to our website, nectarfull.com, and you can find me specifically as a coach. And you can contact me through that as well. Check out, there's some different free resources and things on there too. And then we're on Instagram as well, nectar_full. And you'll see some of my content there as well.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the description below for anybody who's wanting to find you as well. So thank you so much, Bethany.
Yeah, it's so fun.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or psychological advice. If you are in the United States and you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please dial 988 to reach the National Crisis Hotline.